Just based on the amount of turnout and the folks that are listening keenly, we know that we are on a topic, in other words, security, that is at the utmost of importance to organizations and individuals. So, in my session, I'm going to talk about the past, present, and future. And I'm going to talk about it from a perspective of a software operator. As Anirban said, I've had a number of years' experience within the software world, and I'm going to talk to you about that. First, let me start presenting my slides. As I said earlier, good morning to everyone. It's amazing to see you all gathered for this very interesting and timely topic. As Anirban said, my name is Raj Sabhlok. I'm based here in the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. Thankfully, even though I have deep sympathy of what is happening in Southern California, we are hundreds of miles away from the fires there. And while I pray for them, I'm also thankful that we are avoiding those fires. It's my pleasure to be here today. With over 25 years of experience as a technologist, I should say, I've witnessed incredible advancements in technology. However, I've also observed the rise of criminal elements exploiting technology to access individuals' personal data, finances, enterprise, trade secrets, employee records, customer information, and much, much more. We read about it every day in the news. It's a real problem, frankly. And as you'll hear as I go through my presentation, the future is really one where, unfortunately, these attacks do not stop. They get more sophisticated, and it's incumbent upon us as users and enterprise, small and medium businesses to stay savvy and ensure that we're doing the best we can to protect this valuable set of assets that I just mentioned. Technology is arguably one of humanity's most important revolutions. It stands on par with the agricultural and industrial revolutions, and it's really had a major impact and will continue to have a major impact on the course of civilization. I believe we're still in the early stages of the technology revolution. While we've seen remarkable advancements, such as the internet, network computing, Wi-Fi, mobile technology, and now AI, the most pressing challenge remains securing technology. Today, we're here to discuss how to combat this criminal element behind these security challenges. And I should say it's not just the criminal element. Anirban alluded to this. There's also internal threats within the organization, malicious or otherwise. So it becomes extremely important that we look at all these security vectors or potential threat vectors into our organizations. So a little bit more about me and kind of the relevance on why I'm speaking today. I've spent over 25 years managing software companies and now with Bessemer Venture Partners. Anirban talked about the place of venture in this whole ecosystem. I will say that I've always been a proponent of companies trying to bootstrap first, much like miniOrange, And when they can't, be very judicious about raising money and how you use money. Because I think the discipline that you achieve from being very focused on your product and your customer will yield success in many cases. As I say that, I think Honorbond's numbers are correct in terms of how many businesses go out of business. But that's for various reasons. I think one of the beauties about the software world is that it doesn't take a lot of capital to build software products and to get to market. So, my one word of advice for those that are entrepreneurs and building companies is to focus on what you're building, the value it's going to provide to your customers, and build towards that. If you get that right, raising money becomes secondary. It's certainly something that many, many companies do, even profitable companies. This is not a session to talk about that, but I wanted to give my perspective on venture capital, in particular, since I work for a venture capitalist today. But as I said, most of my history has been around creating secure products and protecting users of the companies that I have led by basically securing our infrastructure. Security has always been a top priority, not just for senior executives, but also for board of directors and other stakeholders. So it's very paramount, and at least here in the US, and I'm sure it's happening in other parts of the world, including India, it's not only a civil offense these days to have data breaches and companies just getting a slap on the wrist. There's potential criminal responsibility as well for these software companies. So it becomes very, very important, as I said, not only to senior executives like myself at the companies that I've been with, but all the stakeholders. As you can see, and Honorbond mentioned as well, so I'll quickly go through it. I was the CEO of Hypedrive, which is a very well-known, great CRM product in the market for SMBs. And of course, Zoho, which emanates from India. I was the president. And when I started at Zoho, it was really kind of an IT management company, IT management and security company, I should say. So we were producing types of products that IT organizations leveraged to manage their IT infrastructure and to protect their IT infrastructure and users. When I got there, there was really no concept of Zoho cloud computing SaaS business applications. We had zero revenue in that area. We started down that path in my first year, and we were lucky enough to be able to create some products that were well received in the market. And today, both those lines of businesses continue to exist. Zoho business is well over $500 million in revenue. I'm sure I'm dated on that number. And the Manage Engine business, which I'm going to talk about, which is the IT management and security business that I also managed, is over $500 million in revenue as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we had both at Zoho and Manage Engine. I think it's relevant for probably everybody in the room today. Lastly, prior to my time at Zoho and Manage Engine, I was the CEO of a company called Embarcadero Technologies, which provided database management tools to the enterprise. That's a little bit about my background as a software operator. And now what I'd like to do is talk about some of the relevant overlap with security. As I mentioned, first of all, I had responsibility for the Managed Engine division, which is focused on IT and security management. When I left, we had 90% of the Fortune 100 that were using Managed Engine products to manage and secure their IT infrastructure. However, what I want to mention, because it's very relevant to this discussion today, is as we grew as a company and as we gained popularity, we also became a target for bad guys, if you will, cyber criminals that wanted to get access to enterprises. And this is a very well-known strategy where they target product companies that are well deployed in enterprises, look for vulnerable areas to attack that product, and thereby get access to the enterprise. These are called supply chain attacks. You may have heard of them. And believe it or not, a big part of the responsibility of a software company, and I'm including companies like miniOrange that provide security products, is to focus on making sure that their products are rock solid from a security perspective. With that said, I'm highlighting, and these are scary times when you're a leader of a software company. I'm highlighting some of the attacks that we experienced at Managed Engine. As you could see, on an annual basis, there's critical infrastructure vulnerabilities that are discovered. And as a result, as a software company, we continued to put more resources around product security, ensuring that it was as rock solid as possible. And with that said, we have days like these headlines that you're reading today. And it's an ongoing challenge, and I'll talk more about that as I move forward. A defining moment for Zoho, now I'm talking about the Zoho SaaS services that actually well over 1 million users access today. And the defining moment that I'm talking about is in November of 2015, while we were hosting a global user conference in California. At that very moment where I was actually getting up to, much like Anirban, getting up to do my keynote speech, we were attacked by a Russian cyber criminal group called the Armada Collective. They launched a DDoS attack. At the time, I had no clue what a DDoS attack is. Today, I think it's second nature. Anybody certainly in the security field, but probably the average user has heard of a DDoS attack. And basically what it does, a DDoS attack, it's a crippling attack on our infrastructure that brings down applications or software companies' applications that are basically cloud-based. And that was an unbelievable moment for us because immediately we figured out that we were susceptible to security attacks. And not only that, it significantly affected our customers. In fact, the attack disrupted our operations for well over a week. Think about that. 1 million users, hundreds of thousands of companies that relied on our software and access that software via our SaaS platform was was basically locked out. And they were running their businesses, CRM applications, financial applications on this platform. And, the thing is, while there certainly is a financial impact, there's much more that goes after a cyber attack. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. But let me highlight some very amazing numbers. So the financial costs are skyrocketing. They're only increasing year on year. As we look back to 2024, you could see that the financial costs related to cyber attacks was over $10 trillion. Just mind-boggling numbers. That's what's got everybody's attention, from executives to boards to stakeholders. They want to protect against adding to that toll. In fact, the average cost, and these are for small companies, medium-sized companies, and large companies, the average cost of a data breach was just under $5 million in 2024. So these costs are particularly challenging for small to medium-sized businesses that, frankly, lack the resources to implement and manage their infrastructure and security and the expertise. And so they're really behind the eight ball. Sometimes we think that the only companies that are vulnerable are the largest companies that, have name brands that these cyber attackers are going to go after, like they did when Zoho was attacked. In fact, in 2015, we had significant size, but certainly not on the scale of some of the software companies that we hear about every day, and not of the scale that Zoho is today. Thankfully, we made it past that, and we're able to continue forward. And as I mentioned, moving forward, we took security real seriously and just invested millions and millions of dollars to ensure that we never put our customers in that position again. We never put our business in that position again. So, as I alluded to earlier, it's the financial impact, it's the reputation loss, it's the operational issues such as disrupted services. The reputation loss, you see that as soon as one of these attacks happen. I basically cited straight from news stories the incidents on the previous slide. Those are out there for everybody to see. And when somebody, I imagine, looks at ManageEngine during those times, they have to question, is this a company that we can rely on to provide us with secure products? So it's very, very important beyond just the immediate financial impact. Obviously, reputational and operational issues will lead to additional financial impact, but the impression you leave on customers is also very chilling as well. The main point I want to make is, or one of the main points I want to make is, as the bad guys get more sophisticated, organizations need to do the same. This problem is not going away in the foreseeable future. And we need to be on our toes, on our game with respect to security. Basically, as I like to say, we're in a virtual arms race. So these are like major countries that are battling each other, and they're gaining more and more sophisticated arms. And that's kind of the arms race we're in. It's the good guys against the bad guys. And over the years, I'm going to talk a little bit about the past and how we've gotten to where we are today. Actually, these attacks and software, security software, um, dates back to the 1970s. So I'm going to date myself here. I remember these days when people talked about worms. It was a precursor to viruses. And there was something called the creeper worm in the 1970s. And what that really spawned was a response which was software in the form of antivirus software. In this case, it was called Reaper antivirus software. This continued through the 80s as computer viruses became essentially everywhere. It was almost daily, certainly monthly, if not shorter periods of time, we would hear about these major computer viruses. And that in turn spawned the idea of commercial antivirus and companies like McAfee that would deliver antivirus software and other defenses against these computer viruses. In the 1990s, what we know very well today is phishing attacks and malware attacks that were on the rise. We still see that today, obviously. But that spawned on things like firewalls and antivirus proliferation software to contain the damages and put a box around these types of attacks. So this kind of cat and mouse game continues into the 2000s. As you can see, in the 2000s, cyber threats multiplied and diversified. And with that, on the defensive side, there were more solutions that we started to see, including the concept of open source antivirus software that was available to the masses. We needed it. And then as the 2000s went on, there was continued evolution of sophisticated malware and cyber threats. And in turn, a number of defensive software solutions hit the market. We're just staying one step ahead of these attacks, though. Something that is very, very scary is as we got into the 2000s and even certainly now, are these concepts of state-sponsored attacks. So this is the idea of warfare that is happening with cyber attacks. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that because it's mind-boggling to think that countries that can attack their enemies and bring down their power grids, their water supply, and a lot more. Thankfully, there's a lot of work that's going on in AI and machine learning that is helping to thwart some of these very sophisticated actors that are out there, state-sponsored actors. Ransomware is something that we all hear about. It's real. It's costing companies millions or billions and even trillions, as you saw in one of the earlier slides. There's new technologies that are coming out that we're leveraging, things like blockchain, to help thwart off some of these attacks. Advanced persistent threats continue to be a problem. And at the same time, there's very, very smart, sophisticated security companies that are taking on the risks and attacks in this particular area. So that's a little bit of a kind of a sour note, if you will, talking about all the kind of the history and the decades of cybersecurity attacks and having to thwart those with other software tools that can kind of protect our organizations and individuals. So, what I'd like to talk about here is what kind of things, much like Anirban talked about some trends moving forward, I'm going to talk about some of the cybersecurity predictions for 2025. So, unfortunately, a lot of the AI technology is going to be accessible to bad people, cyber criminals. They're going to be able to leverage this technology, things like agentic AI, where you have autonomous agents that could be deployed by cyber criminals in our organizations to unleash very, very vicious attacks. That is really leveraging new technology. AI driven scams, social engineering is going to surge in 2025 and beyond. This includes deep fakes and impersonations, where we're going to get you're already hearing about it, where a CEO transfers millions of dollars based on a fake interaction with his or her CFO. Very, very crazy stuff. But this technology is that sophisticated where, in this case, a CEO didn't know it was a deep fake of the CFO, and readily transferred money or approved the transfer of funds. Ransomware will continue to evolve. It will be much easier to deploy the cyber attacks using the automation and in combination with AI. That's something we're going to see for real in 2025. Additionally, I talked about the supply chain attacks that are on the rise still. I talked about how that was deployed against Managed Engine and our own tools that we were selling to customers. That's going to continue to be a problem moving into 2025. Democratization of cybercrime tools. This is very ironic, and I touched on it in the last slide, where a lot of the tools, especially in the AI space, are going to be easily leveraged by unsophisticated cyber criminals. It's going to be much easier for them to leverage these tools and perpetuate more and more kinds of attacks. As I said earlier, this geopolitical cyber warfare is intensifying here in the US. It's been well chronicled that states like Russia and China have been influential in our election process. They have not only gone after technology that manages elections, but they also run very sophisticated deceptive ads, deceptive communications that are readily available on platforms like Facebook and Instagram that are really swaying the outcome of elections. So very, very serious stuff. And as I said, we're going to see a lot of cyber warfare play out over the next few years. And it's going to go beyond just meddling with elections. It's going to go into, as I said, attacking power grids, attacking power supplies, critical infrastructure for large populations. So it's something that needs to be addressed. And I'll talk a little bit about the fact that we can use some of these sophisticated technologies. When I say we, the good guys can use some of that technology to fight the bad guys that are leveraging AI technology in particular. Something that's happened over the last couple of months is the realization that quantum computing is on the verge of being a reality. In fact, Google announced their Willow chip and their Willow quantum computing capabilities, which basically says that unlike before, there is basically unlimited potential for the quantum computing capability to solve historically unsolvable problems. The downside to this from a security perspective is while we believe, and the good guys have believed, that things like encryption are ultimately the safest place to be for your data and critical assets. With quantum computing, there's actually a serious threat that because of its vast capability, it can solve some of the algorithms behind the cryptography algorithms to actually get access to what was thought to be completely secure. And we're seeing that as something that bad guys are going to leverage for sure. They are going to use this quantum computing capability to see if they can break things like cryptography algorithms to get access to enterprises' most important data, information, financial information, and so forth. So pretty interesting on where things are going. And I'm not talking about a decade now, I'm not even talking 5 years from now. These are things that are real. And hopefully it just puts us on notice that we need to know what's happening in the field of security, and we need to know about best practices to keep ourselves as safe as possible. As I said, there is a positive note if you want to look at it from that perspective. We, the good guys, being software companies and government organizations and even enterprise, have access to these same sophisticated tools, AI-powered stocks and automation, leveraging this AI technology will redefine defenses moving forward in the field of security. And it's happening today. I see a lot of new companies that are entering the market. I see that from a perspective of being at a VC company that looks at all sorts of IT infrastructure and security companies day in and day out. And it's good to know that we have very, very smart, good people that are working on these problems. Okay, so what do I mean about staying focused on the problem of security as individuals as well as enterprises? In this case, I'm going to focus on the enterprise in particular. But basically, we need to be on our toes. And there are some just table stakes, if you will, that need to be deployed by enterprises and frankly, even small to medium-sized businesses. In this case, let's start with access controls. In Anirban's presentation, he talked about IAM. This is a very important area, something that should not be taken for granted within an enterprise. Strong identity access management, as well as having a principle of least privilege for users in the organization, giving them access to only what they need is very, very critical. And this is a huge burgeoning area. It's why companies like miniOrange are in demand today, because they do this very important piece of the security defense puzzle. Data protection, as I touched on earlier, is also very critical. While quantum computing is coming soon, encryption is still probably the best way to secure and keep your critical assets safe. Data loss prevention, DLP, is absolutely critical. And these are both things that could be implemented at the enterprise as well as small to medium-sized businesses. Need to have a proactive security approach. I recommend, and it's more difficult with small to medium-sized businesses. Enterprise know that they need to have organizations within the company that are focused on security 24/7. And that's really what needs to happen. Finally, this is not a set it and forget it type area. Security is too important. Security is too dynamic. As I said, the bad guys are continually coming up with new avenues, new ways to get into our organizations. And what we need to do is be proactive. In this case, I'm talking about things like penetration testing, regular security audits, and continuous monitoring for behavioral activities that would raise a red flag. These are all things that are important and we can do today to thwart some of the efforts by the bad guys, the cyber criminals. Finally, probably one of the most important things, and I would recommend to organizations to implement employee education around security. This is not a comprehensive list. It is a good list. If you can take care and focus on these 6 items, you're going to be way ahead of other organizations that take it more for granted, take security more for granted. Phishing awareness and educating your employee base is probably the best way to prevent phishing attacks. Password management, things like PAM that was alluded to earlier, are absolutely critical. Just safe internet practices, educating your employee base on what to do, what not to do, making sure that there are some guardrails about what they're doing online, what they're doing offline, frankly, as well. How do they handle sensitive data? And again, this is part and parcel to who has access to this sensitive data. So these are all kinds of things that really, actually everything on this list, 1 through 6, needs to be focused on. There's many more, as I alluded to, but if you can attack this in a very effective way, with some conviction behind it, you're going to be much further ahead. Finally, one of the things that I like to say is be prepared so that you don't become front page news. Let's draw on the past, tackle the present, and prepare for the future of cybersecurity. Stay out of these headlines. And I know this because, as I said at the beginning of the presentation, unfortunately, my company's, it wasn't often, but we were in the headlines. And it's something that I would hope that you can avoid with good cybersecurity practices within your organizations. With that, I want to say thank you for listening to my session today. I wish I could be there. It looks like an incredible 2 days, and I'm sure you're going to gain tremendous amount of knowledge of this very, very important area. Thank you, good luck, and stay safe.